Is it raining? Okay. Okay, please don't rain. Okay. Come here. Come here. Today I don't have physical books to show you because I had to return them to the library. It is the 1st of May. I managed to finish reading everything I wanted to read and a bit more, but I had to return them to the library because they were overdue and I didn't really want to incur any charges. I was kind of paranoid about there being some kind of record of me not returning my books on time. Like, surely they must have a record of that sort, right? Like, if somebody always never returns their book on time, isn't there a blacklist for it? I'm not sure how it works. Maybe I will ask my librarian friends, but in my head that's how it works. So I was like, okay, forget it, I'm just going to return them. Yep. Anyway, this month I read 9 books, I think 9. Let me count. 7, 8, 9. Yes, okay, I read 9 books. 2 of them are from the Bridgerton series, so I read books 1 and book 2. Book 1 is The Duke and I. Book 2 is The Viscount Who Loved Me. So book 1 focuses a lot on Daphne and Simon, the Duke of Hastings. Book 2 is about Anthony and this, would I call her neglected? Maybe overlooked older sister, Kate, and their romance. Of course, like, there are tropes at play here. So for book 1, it's like fake dating and then they fall in love. And then there is this idea of how do you reconcile differing family values. And for book 2, it was like enemies to lovers because Kate and Anthony did not get along. On the whole, I would say that book 2 is more enjoyable than book 1. I'm actually halfway through book 3 now, and it's not, how to say, it's not as progressive as books 1 and 2. It follows the Cinderella trope, and the reviews are not very forgiving. A lot of people didn't like book 3 at all, but maybe book 4 will be better. I'm kind of hoping book 4 will be the best of all. Okay, so aside from that, the other books I read were... I'm just gonna show the picture of the book that I took because I had to return them to the library. I read The Maids by Junichiro Tanizaki. So this is supposed to be like a sequel to a previous book written by him called The Makioka Sisters. The Makioka Sisters was like a more serious work focusing on the aristocracy, but The Maids focus a lot on, obviously, the maids. So the maids and what they were like when they first came, how their lives were when they were growing up in their hometowns, and also like how did they eventually manage to settle down, like, because they worked for a rich family that took care of them. Yeah? Yeah? Yes? No, come. You want tea? You want tea? You want or not? Aiya, I don't understand what he wants. Aiya, I don't understand him. Okay. So, I actually really enjoyed The Maids. I felt really invested in their lives. Like, when they were fighting over a man, I was like, okay, I wonder who is going to get him. And when they had to talk about, okay, there's this maid who is like very strong and she has a nice figure and everything, but her face is not very nice, will she get married? And then eventually when she does, it's just like, I'm so happy for her. I mean, I know it's all like a work of fiction, but the way it's written is like not fictional. It was written from the perspective of like an observer of this household, so it's like, it has this like non-fiction style, but you know it's fiction. So that is The Maids by... Yes? Yeah, I really don't know why he's like this today. Okay, you just, if you hear his meowing, you just ignore. Okay, I'm going to try to ignore it because he's not telling me what he wants either. Okay, the fourth book I read was By the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. It's a Tommy and Tuppence mystery. So Tommy and Tuppence are supposed to be this couple. I think this is like the last Tommy and Tuppence novel. It's written when they are already like in middle age and they already have children who are already grown up, but there are allusions to their previous books. So what I can gather is that they used to solve mysteries together, and then Tommy, he works in the secret service or something like that, so he has insider info, and then his wife Tuppence is used to help. But because she's a woman, she faces a lot of discrimination. But at the same time, because she's a woman, she gets to go to places and she gets to like listen in and kaypo. And then when she's kaypoing, she solves the mystery. So By the Breaking of My Thumbs is about how one time when they are visiting Tommy's aunt in a nursing home, Tuppence encounters an old lady who says something very strange, and she starts to think that this old woman is in danger. Like, because when they come back next time, the old woman has been mysteriously transferred out by somebody else, and she thinks that this old lady knows information about a series of murders that happened in the past, and that she is now in danger because she talks too much despite being senile and babbling don't know what kind of nonsense. But I'm not going to spoil it for you. I didn't really see it coming. The ending it is. So it was pretty good. The 5th book I read was Miss Ice Sandwich by Mieko Kawakami. I've read her other books like A Record of a Night Too Brief, and I really enjoyed it. I put it in like my favorites highlight because the way she writes is just so accessible but also like so dreamy, and she really gets to the heart of the issue. Like, she shows not tells, you know. And then she also writes very specifically about women's issues, and for that I can understand. So in Miss Ice Sandwich, it's not really about women's issues, but it approaches it. It's written from the perspective of like a 10-year-old boy who has kind of like fallen in love with the lady that hands out the ice sandwiches at the local supermarket. So this lady, she's described by others as being disfigured, as having eyes that are too big, and she highlights them by wearing striking blue eyeliner. And sometimes customers in the supermarket, they will come over and they will like verbally abuse her. They will shout things like saying like, you shouldn't be showing your face, etc, etc. And the 10-year-old boy just doesn't get it, because to him this woman is like the most beautiful woman in the world. He can't get enough of her. He's like besotted, and he even tries to draw her. So he's been trying to draw her face, trying to capture her, and in the end he does succeed. And then his friend, who also has a kind of an exciting private life with her single dad, they watch movies every night, she encourages him to give his drawing to her, to meet her properly, to introduce himself, and not just admire her from afar anymore, but to have an encounter. And he does so, and he finds out that she's moving away because she's getting married. And this is like a good thing, because one of the things that he heard other people say about her is that she's too ugly to ever get married. It's really mean, right? Like, yeah. So it's that kind of book where it's written from a child's perspective, and it just highlights everything that is wrong with the world around you, and it just shows you this childlike innocence without the prejudice, without the discrimination, without all the ugliness. And it just really touched my heart when I read it, so I enjoyed this book a lot. Okay, the next book I read is 450 from Paddington, also by Agatha Christie. So this is about Miss Jane Marple. She's once again our elderly spinster detective. Her friend, while on the train, ends up parallel to another train, and they're going around a curve, and then she witnesses through a window a murder of a young blonde woman, and she reports it, but there is no body found. So Miss Jane Marple, she kind of hires a younger woman to help her do her legwork, to apply for a job as a cleaner at the house that she thinks the body might have been dumped at. And the body is found in the sarcophagus in the barn that belongs to the house where she sent her friend to go and work. So after that, it's just a lot of twists and turns as you try to figure out of this family, who was it that killed this woman, who even is this woman, what is her relation to the family that lives there, because they had a lot of children, but the eldest son died, and then the second daughter also died, and it's quite interesting. I didn't really see it coming until towards the end. Then I was like, could it be that person? And yep, it was. So hey, not bad, you know. Every time I was trying to figure out who the murderer is, and I'm usually not successful at all. I can't figure out who it is, which just goes to show that as the reader, you just can't help but pick up on all the red herrings and take them as real clues, right? So how many books am I now? Six books, right? Okay, the 7th book I read was A Hero Born. So this is the Legend of the Condor Heroes book 1. From what my dad told me, he said there are 12 books. He said the first one was called Set Dew, so it's like shoot the arrow, and then he says that the second one is San Dew, which is like a legendary arrow, and it didn't really make sense to me at the time because he said he read the series when he was in secondary school. So if you do the math, right, the books were written in like the 60s. My parents were already born in the 60s, so they read these books growing up. And he told me that in Hong Kong, every year there is like a new movie made based on these books, and that they are wildly popular. And my mother also read them. So that day during lunch, they were just having the most heated discussion over whether or not one person can be considered a villain or not. Yeah, it didn't occur to me that this series of books was like the Harry Potter of that region and that time. But I think it's making a comeback now because I have seen like teenagers read the books from this series. So I read book 1, A Hero Born, and how to say, I've never really read a lot of can I call it silk punk? It's not even silk punk because there's no technology. I've never really read this kind of like Chinese wuxia novels, mainly because the language itself is a huge barrier to entry. I haven't really touched Chinese in 10 years. And even in my past experiences reading Chinese, it was always like forced upon me. I don't have a choice. I want to pass the exam so I can graduate, so I have to read it, right? I mean, I can read it, it's just it's very hard. It's for me. I feel like sometimes reading Japanese is easier because I've put in work recently, so my brain is geared towards Japanese. But when it comes to Chinese, I can say the word in the Japanese language, but I don't really know how to say it in Chinese because Chinese is analphabetic, right? Like you either know it or you don't know it. Maybe you can aga by looking at the pang, but then if you don't know means you don't know. There's like no other way to guess from it. But for Japanese, it's like it's easier to build the vocabulary for Japanese, in my personal opinion lah. Kanji is a different thing altogether. So anyway, everything was translated, but because it's translated, they still tried to capture the meaning of the names, which is very weird. So you have like Sky Fury Guo and Ironheart Yang. They are sworn brothers. They are married to Lily Lee and Charity Bao. To someone like me, it was obviously hilarious at the start, until I realized that like all the girls have names like that because they are meant to like represent ideal feminine qualities. So you have like, yes, yeah, yeah, Aiden. He's just looking at me with this beleaguered expression on his face. I don't know what he wants. Don't interrupt me, shh. Okay, so in this book, the girls have names that are supposed to represent the ideal qualities, I guess. So we'll have like Mercy Mu, who is a beautiful fighter. You have Lotus Huang, who is also a beautiful fighter. Then I guess Charity and Lily are just like the ideal wives. Yeah, so the story goes that these two sworn brothers, they are patriots. And then one day, like okay, I'm not gonna spoil the story for you. I think like you need to go and read it for yourself. But what's really interesting to me were the long descriptions of the wuxia fighting. Like, you know, when you watch Jackie Chan movies, it just completely defies the laws of gravity and like physics, right? Like, how can they jump from here onto a cloud? It makes no sense. Like, even growing up, when I watched those kind of like Sun Wukong TV shows, in my head it wasn't so cool, but like when you read it, suddenly it's very cool. I think because there are no limits to your imagination. So in my imagination, it's epic, and this really is an epic. This book is an epic. And even religion itself is like inextricably tied up with martial skills. Like when there is a Taoist, he confirm can fight one, you know, and then he'll fight very well. And then there's like the Taoist League or something, there is like the Beggars Association. Yeah, everyone can fight. I was just very surprised. And then their moves are very funny. So there is this priest, and then he very short-tempered, and then he carries around this giant vase of alcohol. It's called a censer. I think it's the thing that you gong in the temple or something like that. I really do not know, but he can, like, apparently it's don't know how many kgs, and then he can lift it over his head with one hand. And then how the 7 freaks like test their martial prowess is to see how well they can manipulate this thing that weighs a ton. So they will like spin it around and throw it to each other, demonstrate their martial skills. And okay lah, it's quite cool. Like when you're reading it, I didn't expect to be impressed, but I was impressed. Yeah, so it's about these two guys, Ironheart Young and Sky Fury Guo. They are killed, or so to believe, and then their sons by right are supposed to be sworn brothers, but they kind of end up being enemies because one boy was raised on the Mongolian steppes. This one son, he was actually like basically training under Genghis Khan, and I feel like a huge portion of the book was dedicated to Genghis Khan. In my head, I don't really know anything about Genghis Khan except for where he is, because like you may watch those movies, right? The Mongolians are always portrayed as bad, like the bad guys, but Genghis Khan was super cool. Like you get to read about all these like political intrigue between Genghis Khan and his stepfather and his stepbrother and his sworn brother, and yeah, it's just wow. I can completely understand why everyone was so enamored by this series. Like if I had the reading ability and I grew up at the time, I would have loved this series. So I'm kind of glad that I have the opportunity to love it in a language that I am better at. That's one son. The other son was raised in the palace. He of course was also trained in the martial arts and everything, but he thinks that he's of royal blood, but he's not of royal blood. He's like the adopted son of the 6th Jin prince. So Jin is like Jing, you know, like the Jing Empire. So this was the Jing Empire. And thinking about it, it's like, how do you do the math? It's maybe like 900 years ago. So the story is set 900 years ago. That's pretty cool. I borrowed books 2 and 3. I haven't been able to find book 4, but once I do, I will read it too. So books 2 and 3 are definitely on my to be read list. Okay, after this book, now we are on book 8, right? Bridgerton 7. Yeah, now that was 7 books. Now we're going to the 8th book. The 8th book is another Agatha Christie mystery. It's The Body in the Library, also a Jane Marple mystery, because I feel like Jane Marple, I kind of prefer her to Hercule Poirot, simply because she's this like dithery, cute old lady nobody takes seriously. It's about an elderly couple who are just basically living a normal life in the village, and then one day they wake up and there is a maid screaming about how there is a dead girl in the library, which is kind of like a murder mystery trope. It's like a nod to the genre, and she does use the trope. And the funny thing is, she also refers to herself, so I thought that was quite meta of her. In fact, the whole book is quite meta. And then after that, there is another girl who turns up dead, but she's like burnt in an abandoned car, and nobody knows what happened to her. And as you read the book, you just kind of start to see the two seemingly unrelated cases start to converge on each other. And I feel like the moral of the story here is that you shouldn't automatically believe everything that everyone says, because the reason why the police department were waylaid for so long is because they took the initial witnesses' statements as fact, and then after that they tried to base everything after that. But when that is debunked, you can then pursue an alternative line of thought. So I feel like that's quite applicable to a lot of things. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so the ninth book that I read this month is Breast and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami again. This is like a really thick book. Like it's as thick as, it's like 1Q84 level of thickness, you know, but of course I found it more enjoyable than 1Q84. This book has 2 parts. The first part is very short. It's like almost a novella. It's about a woman whose older sister is suddenly obsessed with My Cat Is Back. Okay, the older sister is suddenly obsessed with getting breast implants, even though she's like a middle-aged bar hostess and everything, and her teenage daughter is going through puberty and also an existential crisis. So the narrator is a writer, kind of struggling with it as well. So all three of them are trying to negotiate their own existences, and what does it mean to be a woman in Japan? What does it mean to be a working class woman in Japan? What does it mean to be a novelist in Japan? It's just a huge struggle for all of them. And the second book then shows us a bit more about the narrator, who is suddenly seized with the desire to have a child. However, she is asexual, meaning for her, like, she just really doesn't want to have sex at all. It's a deeply painful and traumatizing experience for her. I don't think I've ever read a book that really detailed what it was like being ace in a society where, how to say, like, heterosexuality and heterosexual unions are kind of compulsory if you want to have a place in society. So she becomes estranged from her friends because all they do is talk about their kids. They don't love their husbands, but they're still in the marriage. It doesn't make sense lah. And then she decides to try artificial insemination, but of course it's not allowed yet. Having a child for yourself outside of the nuclear family unit is seen as something that is taboo. So she's just trying to find out, should she even have a child? And then there is this other incident of children of donors going through midlife crises when they find out that the father they thought was their father was not their real father, because their parents never told them. I guess they had to find out the hard way, and it becomes like an ethical issue. And a lot of the later half of this novel focuses on whether or not it is ethical to have children, because when you have a child, the analogy given is that you go into a forest and there's a house. Inside there are 10 sleeping children. They are sleeping very peacefully. They are happy. But if you want to wake them up, maybe 9 of them will thank you for waking them up. But the 10th child will be in constant pain for every single second that they are awake. So will you still go and wake them up? It's an analogy for when you have a child. Most people think that, okay, it'll be fine, my child may not suffer, my child may have a good life, but there is always that off chance that the child you bring into the world will end up having the worst life possible, and they will end up hating their existence and hating their lives. So is it not then considered an act of violence to bring a child into the world knowing that there is this percentage chance that they might suffer? And one of the perspectives put forth is that if you continue to do so anyway, you do it because you are selfish, and it's because the person that will be suffering is not you. It simply cannot be you, because you are the one bringing this child into the world. And because you know that it's not you who is going to be suffering, you can do something like that. That was quite an intense read, not to mention a very long read. It's like this thick, you know. And I feel like overall this book is just trying to show you all the internal and external struggles that come with being a working class woman in Japan. When you're no longer a student, you're no longer in your 20s, no longer at the attractive, acceptable age, what avenues do you have for fulfillment, for love, for contentment in your life? So that was what I read in 1 month. Surprisingly, I thought I wouldn't have the time to read so much, but I think like when there is a deadline, meaning like the date I have to return the books by, it kind of motivates me to read fast, and then my brain just processing speed times 200% or something like that. I'm not confident that I can do the same for May, because it's kind of like the last push of the semester and I'm already starting to drown in work. I'm definitely feeling the effects of burnout. Like, I can sleep and no amount of sleep makes me feel better. Yeah, I just feel like crap all the time. So is it ethical to put me in this world to force me to have to survive? I don't get it either. Sometimes, like, when I was reading the book, I was like, actually, yeah, there are times where I feel like, actually, why am I even born? Like, I kind of wish I wasn't. Like, when you are born, majority of it is just suffering and pain. There are moments where it's not suffering and pain, but if you know for certain that there will be suffering and there will be pain, why bring a child into this world? I would rather reduce the amount of pain and suffering in another child's life, the child that already exists, you know? That is a perspective I'm considering. Yep, this coming month, the month of May, I'm planning to finish reading the other Bridgerton books. I'm reading book 3 now, as I mentioned, so that's 1 book. Then I will read book 4, maybe 5 and 6, so that's 4 books already. And then I have the 2 books from the Condor Hero series, so that's 6 books. And if I can, I will fit in another book, like the ghostly stories of Japan. I think it's about yokai. I'm very excited about yokai, so that will be 7 books. Yeah, that seems feasible. Seems feasible. Yep, because the Bridgerton collection is very easy to read. It's not hard. It's just you read it and then you, oh, this is lovely. Oh, I love the intrigue. Oh, I love the process of seeing like 2 people get together and then they get married. I think like this is why people enjoy reading books that obviously have a marriage plot. It's just it's comforting. Oh my god. Yes? Yes? I really don't know what he wants. Okay, I'm gonna go and comfort my cat. Yes? What do you want? Yes? Yes, yes? What do you want? Clean your eyes. It's time to cut your claws, Kanan. Oh, they're so sharp. Wow. Wow. I think if possible I will maybe compile to be read for the month of May, but that will depend on whether or not I have enough time. Okay, until next time.